So, before we get into tips and strategies to get us through COVID-19, let us just take a moment to look at the lessons learned so far to date, as at the time of recording. So, lessons from lockdown life. I've had a think 6 months in. I'm in the UK. I believe it was the 23rd of March, lockdown. The whole economy, the whole nation was ordered to stay indoors. And there's a few things that sort of came to mind. First thing that struck me, I have to say, is the amount of people and the amount of businesses who were broke, skint. I mean, literally immediately, no surplus, no reserves. Literally by the end of the week, they were like, "Well, we can't continue. We've got no money left." I found that not shocking, a little bit surprising at the speed with which people are like, "I haven't got no money," and I mean like literally straight away. So I thought that that was very interesting. And then there's a new word to learn, furlough. I had never, and I'm someone with a background in accounts, never heard of the word furlough before. And I do payroll, never heard of the word furlough before. So that was a new word for my vocabulary. I also learned or realized, and not just me, but I think other people too, that there's actually a lot of jobs that can be done remotely. So you might have been working in a business whereby people have always resisted you working remotely, but now all of a sudden, when the government says, well, actually, those who can work from home need to work from home, all of a sudden, a lot of us were working from home. And what I did find shocking, and I was pleased, but what I thought was amazing in a sense was that even the homeless were taken off the streets. So like literally no one was outside. The homeless can be housed. And what that taught me is that we've had a homeless issue, especially in London, forever, for years. But yet at the drop of a hat, click of the fingers, everyone can be found a home. And you see, this is the thing. What I learned really is that when there's the political will, when people want to do something, something can be done. Homeless people could have been housed all along from the beginning. There's no need for homelessness uh, in a Western economy with the amount of money splashing about. But no one wanted to help. But now, as soon as, oh my gosh, there's this dangerous virus on the loose, everyone's got to be indoors. The homeless all of a sudden found were found somewhere to stay, somewhere to live, some they were housed. So that I thought was interesting. Other things is that not everyone suffered. Some people quietly enjoyed the isolation. I must put my hand up and admit that I was one of them. It wasn't an endurance test for me. It was actually all right. And you'll see from the picture here, during quarantine, the extroverts found it difficult, but the introverts were like laughing, like, yeah, it's my life, stay at home, lovely. So this is the thing, we talk a lot about mental health and how difficult it is, and isolation and all the rest of it. Maybe that's half the people, but no one's really talking about the other half who really quite liked it. But that said, what we also have learned from lockdown is that your home is either a happy home or somewhat like a prison. And so if you're living with an abuser or in difficult domestic circumstances, your situation was very different from someone who was just at home, nice and cozy, feet up, very happy. Um, some people really enjoyed it. So I've got this little meme here. 8th day of self-isolation and it's like Vegas in my house. We're losing money by the minute. Cocktails are acceptable at any hour and nobody knows what time it is. Some people literally were in their pajamas and stayed in them. It's, I've seen some funny things whereby, I saw one which said to make sure you try on your outside clothes now and again because pajamas are very comfortable and you don't know how much weight you're putting on. And some businesses did very well. And I have got a picture here of Zoom. I mean, a lot of people hadn't heard of Zoom before this lockdown. And I think Zoom has done particularly well because people needed to stay connected and Zoom it was. I mean, I did webinars on Zoom. I actually signed up, and just for a month, I did a subscription to Zoom, um, because that was useful for what I was doing. So I'm sure the Zoom sales did extremely well. Even like on TV and other places were mentioning Zoom. So nobody really talked about Skype, but Zoom it was. Other lessons learned from lockdown is that some people found that they could actually save money, and oftentimes this was for the first time, and it was usually due to reduced travel costs and non-essential shops being closed. So all that money that you waste, nipping into the coffee shop before or after work or at lunchtime or whenever, just non-essential things that you're buying. When you don't have that to buy, then you have more money. So that was an interesting lesson for some people. Some people turned their misfortune into fortune very quickly. So you had some ingenious people who started making masks, maybe masks with a flag on, with company logos on. Some sold toilet roll because they had bought it all out and then were selling it for like 5 times the price. Same for hand sanitizers. But others ended up being exposed overnight. So for example, there are a group of people out there who are in property, and what they do is they have a strategy called rent to rent, whereby they will rent a house off someone and then put that on Airbnb, hopefully with the owner's knowledge. But when doing it on Airbnb, as maybe furnished accommodation, they're marking up the price and making a handsome, return on it. But Airbnb, literally, when this whole lockdown was introduced, cancelled all bookings overnight and gave the money back to the people who had booked. And so all the people who were hosts, who had accommodation, who had property, didn't receive any compensation. And a lot of them were very angry about that. But I think Airbnb did the right thing by giving the traveller back the money, and not penalising them for it. But there are people who literally lost thousands of pounds in confirmed bookings because the whole calendar just got cancelled overnight. So that exposed a lot of people, because for those particularly in rent to rent, they still had the rent to pay to whoever they were letting from, so that their landlord, but they had no guests coming over to stay with them. So immediately their strategy, and one which was, I think, being pushed and was very popular, was immediately exposed. And then the government's rescue package, I believe, at 80% of wages in the UK, I think was one of the most generous out there. And obviously, that opinion will vary depending on if you were qualified to receive that package. But I thought that the UK government, the UK Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, was very generous. And I think anyone who received their 80% furlough wages, I haven't heard anyone complain about getting 80% of their wages. I think it was very, very generous. And those who have been paying themselves by dividends were the ones who suffered. But if you were on a payroll, even if it's your own business and you're on your own business payroll and you're paying your taxes each month as you're going along, you received something. If you've been filling out a self-assessment tax form, you received something. But not those who pay themselves dividends. And so that there's a lesson. The lesson there was that when you were on the payroll and you've been paying this tax as you've gone along, it's actually, for once, worked in your favour, if you like. Other lessons was that, and this is particularly for the UK market, those who voted Conservative, which was the majority of the population, because the Conservative government got in with I think it's an 86-seat majority at the in the last election. It was surprising how many of them, these so-called Tory voters, wanted socialist policies and bailouts. Traditionally, the Conservative government, and there's the leader there, Boris Johnson, UK leader of the Conservative Party, they're very much for business and very much for, okay, you know, we are right wing, so therefore, you know, every man for themselves type thing. But when this happened, the amount of people who were like, we want our furlough scheme, we need a handout, we need a grant, we need help from the government. And I just thought, how interesting, how very interesting. Everyone's out there with their handout, but yet you don't vote in for the party, the left wing party, who are more socialist by nature. In the UK, everyone was talking about Brexit because there was that deadline on the 31st of January 2020, and all of a sudden it would seem as though everyone stopped talking about Brexit, and now all of a sudden we're all talking about this coronavirus. So that was a lesson that, you know, the agenda has completely changed. And one thing I've noticed, which has surprised me, this has been something that I've observed, is that conspiracy theorists, and I say that quote unquote, are now making mainstream news. And the word conspiracy theory is bandied about a lot more. I find that very interesting. I don't think it's necessarily because it's a slow news day, but it's because virus and population control and um, this kind of thing is something that conspiracy people have been predicting or warning against rather for some time. David Icke being a major name. And what shocked me during this lockdown is that his channel was banned. Now, he's been around for years saying what he's saying, a little bit like Alex Jones, years, years, years. And all of a sudden he's banned. And why is that? It's because there's a thing called attention. And there's a saying that attention is currency. David Icke, during this uh, pandemic, he'd call it a pandemic, was getting a lot of attention. And when I say attention, it was largely he had the ears of people. And he did a YouTube on a channel with David Rose, and I think his name's David Rose, and London Real is the name of the YouTube channel, which also got threatened with being taken down. And I think they had something like 1 million viewers live streaming, or they were live. The website crashed a couple of times, but live watching what David Icke had to say from all around the world. Nowhere, I don't think ever in the history of everywhere, has so many people, like millions, tuned in at the same time to hear one man talk. And I think that just got too much for YouTube, who were concerned, and for the other powers who were thinking, oh, you know, everyone's listening to him, we've got to ban him. So censorship seems to be increasing. That's something I've noticed. And there's more and more people online. So people seem to have more time to look at these things now. And I've noticed censorship. All the lessons learned is that hairdressers really should be in that essential business category. So we can see pre-Rona, got James Brown here, salons are closed, hair's growing out a little bit, he can do it himself. And then after lockdown, and you can see the difference. Coming out of quarantine, like, and then you see the eyebrows, you see the regrowth, the nails have grown out, and the eyelashes have gone. After quarantine, you will either look like you want to beat up Thanos or you want to eat up upon us. So one thing I learned is that some people put on weight, a lot of weight. Others worked on themselves. Others use this time to work on themselves. And when I say that, I mean personal development. I also mean to work out. And this is back to this discipline of what we can do with our time. And others just completely, because the gyms were shut, they just their routine was broken. They just sat on the TV and watched Netflix or something. And another lesson that I learned is that some people really can't cook. But not even that, it's just they rely so heavily on fast food. So you've got a meme. My reaction to McDonald's shutting down completely took further notice. Some people lost their mind. I mean, like, my goodness, what do you mean McDonald's is closed until further notice? Like, some people, whatever your addiction was, whether it was gambling, whether it was fast food, what, you know, a lot of people's patterns got interrupted. That's what I learned. And so all those people out there who thought, oh my gosh, I can't manage without a whatever it is, guess what? They managed without a whatever it is. So those were lessons learned. There was also some shocking things. Many accountants did a lot for their customers during this time, and some charged and some didn't. And some of those who didn't charge have been left feeling a little bit underappreciated because a lot of these announcements were to do with money and what you can claim and what help is out there. A lot of people then immediately get on the phone, send an email to their accountants, and a lot of accountants were just snowed under with just trying to deal with people. So, although it was in quarantine, for some people it was a quiet time, and for others it was like all systems go. Unfortunately, because there was a lot of government help and stuff out there, a lot of new frauds became apparent. And this is what I've learned, like, no matter what's going on, there are some people intent on just ripping people off. So out came the fraudsters. So in the UK, we had bounce back loans. There's an estimate, I don't know how much millions of those loans have been claimed fraudulently because they were released so quickly. The checks were minimal. So bounce back loans are have been taken advantage of. There's a lot of scams that have all of a sudden come out of nowhere. So people are claiming that they've got COVID testing kits and send them some money. They'll send you one. They're knocking on doors saying, oh, we've got a COVID testing kit if you want to do it now. You just need to pay us this amount of money. So it's amazing how the con artists look and see what's happening, and then out comes a scam. And there've been some really high profile collapses that have really, really shocked me. So you've got Virgin Australia went into administration. And in the UK, there's STA Travel. They are global. They're known as another name in Canada and America. I can't quite remember what they're called overseas, but they're called STA Travel in the UK. And I just want to say a word on STA Travel because they were founded in 1971, and it took decades, obviously, to build up this company, 40 odd years, decades. And they have high street branches all across London and the UK, and in quite, I'd say, expensive kind of areas like Victoria, in I think it's in Kensington, in Islington. And what they do is they specialise in student and gap year travel. And with them, I went to Egypt with them, I went to Jordan with them, I went to India, Taj Mahal, I went to Peru to view to do the Inca Trail. I was doing it's on my bucket list to do the seven wonders of the world. And so I went to, and I've been to other places as well, Guatemala, Colombia, Panama, Central America, so various places. I've travelled with them on many occasions, many times. And in the UK, we had our lockdown in March and they collapsed in August 2020. So imagine that. It's taken you 40 years to build this chain of, say, high street travel agents specialising in student gap year travel and doing these tours and these adventures. And then within the space of, what, 5 months, it's all gone. It's amazing for me. It's just mind boggling. But unfortunately, they are in travel, and travel is an industry that has been really highly impacted negatively by this virus and is not likely to see a comeback for some time. So it was just quite sad, really, quite shocking how quickly things just deteriorate. And some businesses just had to stop. I mean, Primark, I mean, this shocked me. I want to just share this lesson with you, that they apparently turn over around about £650 million a month, and it went to nil overnight in March with the lockdown. And that's because, and they said that they don't really have an online presence. Their stuff's too cheap and they don't have like the infrastructure to really, be sending things out for people to shop online. So they just have these mega stores and people just come in and spend money with them. But because they don't have that sort of internet base, they went from £650 million a month to nil. No online presence. Amazing. But on a brighter note, some found the time to write, and it's amazing how people have the same idea. So Sue Miller writes this book, Lessons from Lockdown. You've got another one by Mahesh Babu, Lessons from Lockdown. Yep, it's crazy. Another Lessons from an Introvert During Lockdown. 7 life lessons from lockdown. So there's a lot of this lockdown lessons learned, lockdown, and all of the rest of it. This one here by Phil Ikomwasa, The New Normal. So some people found the time to write. I actually have a podcast called the Authors Podcast, which you can find at authors.podbean.com and on iTunes and other platforms. And on my show, the Authors Podcast, I talk to authors and I talk about how did you manage to write a book and all the rest of it. And I had an interview with a guy called Joshua Shear, and he managed to write his book called Porn of the Pandemic, How 3 Months in 2020 Changed Everything. So some people used their time productively. Others were on social media. My question to you is, what did you do? During lockdown, what did you do? Did you put your time to good use, or did you sort of waste it away? And I do want this to be an encouraging kind of thing. When we look back, we must always learn the lessons. So if you emerged from lockdown without either a new skill or a new side hustle, you don't lack the time, you lack the discipline. Because I think it's safe to say we all had a little bit more extra time on our hands. Because even if you worked from home, I'm sure there was some sort of saving of time whereby you didn't have to travel. So time was saved in that aspect. So what did you do with this extra time that you had? That's the question. And discipline is all about doing what needs to be done, even if you don't want to do it. So even if you don't want to go for that run, for that jog, you've got to do it. That's discipline. And now you see, the thing is, history repeats itself endlessly for those who are willing to learn from the past. And that's a quote by Leon Brown or Eon Brown? But the key thing is that chances are we may have a second lockdown. Maybe not as global and as extensive as the first, but chances are it will happen again. Because they keep talking about the second wave and the numbers are going up, so we've got to do a lockdown again, etc., etc. So I just do this bit just to encourage you to learn the lessons of the first lockdown and just understand that there is a window of opportunity. And if we do have a second lockdown, wherever you are in the world, wherever you are listening to this, learn the lessons of the first one and do put your time to good use second time round. It might even be a third lockdown, a fourth lockdown, but just put your time to good use.